The Senate is expected to vote this week on its Iran nuclear bill. The bipartisan legislation would give lawmakers a say on any final nuclear deal with Iran, giving them 30 days to pass a resolution of disapproval, as well as preventing the White House from lifting certain sanctions on Iran. Meanwhile, Iran is waging a war of words right now, warning Congress that it is, in fact, powerless to stop this potential agreement. Joining me now is Republican Senator Jerry Moran of Kansas. He is a member of the Senate Commerce, Banking, and Appropriations Committees. Senator, good to have you on the program. Thanks so much for joining us.
Maria, good morning. Good to be with you.
Is Congress, in fact, powerless on this deal?
Well, certainly Congress has been excluded in this deal for a long time. I've been to a number of even classified briefings in which you learn very little about the content of where the Obama administration is going, what the deal will look like. And so I think Congress is finally reasserting itself into the process. You outlined the nature of this legislation, which would say that, first of all, after 5 days, the president has to provide written description, not just description, the words of any agreement. I've asked for what's the agreement to date. Where's the piece of paper with signatures on it from Iran and the United States? Apparently doesn't exist, nothing we've seen. So we would see the agreement. Secondly, the sanctions could not be lifted while the Congress considers that agreement. That's important. And the problem that we have here is that the current sanctions imposed by Congress against Iran have national security waivers provisions in them that allow a president to waive those sanctions. And so Congress gave up, in my view now, too much of its authority. And finally, every 90 days, a president, this one and the next, would have to certify that the Iranians are complying with the agreement. The real purpose, I think, in this legislation is to get the American people, through Congress, to be able to see what the agreement is, and then the American people, through Congress, can determine whether or not this agreement is worthy of the United States entering into.
And of course, as we speak, Iran is saying, well, we want the sanctions lifted as soon as the deal is signed, if not earlier. I want to get your take, Senator, on whether or not you believe that the vote will come to pass this week and whether or not the president will sign it. So stay with us. We've got a lot to talk about with you today, Senator Moran. But first, let's take a look at exactly what is in that bill and what's at stake. Fox News senior correspondent Eric Shawn with that angle. Eric, good morning to you.
Good morning, Maria, and good morning, everyone. As we have been saying this morning, that Senate bill on Iran set to be finally voted on this coming week. But the big question this morning, what will be in it? And more importantly, will it really work? The bill, named after Republican Senators Bob Corker and Democrat Ben Cardin, would give Congress oversight but not approval of any agreement with Iran. It would block President Obama from ending sanctions for 60 days while Congress reviews the agreement and, as the senator said, certify every 90 days that Iran is actually complying. But a flurry of amendments were floated to try and change it. One would have certified Iran does not support terrorism that kills Americans. Another, that Iran recognize Israel. And then there was the demand that Tehran release the 3 U.S. citizens still imprisoned there, a Christian pastor, a Washington Post reporter, and a Marine veteran. Those amendments came from Senators Tom Cotton, an outspoken Iran critic, and Marco Rubio. But the legislation could slam into Oval Office opposition before it ever hits Tehran.
The president would certainly veto any amendment or any bill with an amendment that undermined the unanimous compromise that was reached in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, or that interfered with the ongoing negotiations.
And the leader of the largest Iranian opposition group, Maria Bartiromo of the National Council of Resistance of Iran, warned at a congressional hearing just this past week that the West has not done enough to hold Iran accountable.
The mullahs sought to obtain nuclear weapons, to export fundamentalism and guarantee their own existence. Unfortunately, little, if anything, was done to prevent the export of fundamentalism.
But Vice President Joe Biden insists if Iran does not comply, the deal would be dead.
If what's on the table doesn't meet the president's requirements, there will be no deal. And a final deal must effectively cut off Iran's uranium, plutonium, and covert pathways to a bomb. If it doesn't, there will be no deal.
The Vice President also said that without an agreement, Iran could have enough enriched uranium in 3 months to build 8 bombs. So while the Senate moves to a vote this week, Iran continues to enrich, itself a brazen violation of 6 United Nations Security Council agreements against just that. Maria?
Amazing. Thanks very much, Eric Shawn, with the latest there. More now with Senator Jerry Moran. And Senator, Joe Biden just said if this doesn't meet the president's standards, there will be no deal. The question is, does the president have the same standards as Congress?
That's a great question, and I think the answer clearly from my point of view and many of us in Washington, D.C. and Congress is he does not. The president seems so intent upon negotiating a deal that it doesn't seem to matter what the contents of that agreement are. And while the vice president said what he said, that's certainly not the way I understand the nature of the agreement. But again, Congress has been shut out. There has been no light shined upon, little light shined upon what the agreement is or will be. And you hear the Iranians contradict what the administration says they've agreed to. And still you have the Iranians insisting that the sanctions be lifted before the agreement is signed. No one would negotiate in that fashion. And here's what I think where we are is that we need to make certain we're not negotiating the agreement. My guess is this agreement is bad for the United States, bad for our allies, supporters, and friends in the Middle East and around the globe, damaging to our country's national security, creates an opportunity for terrorists to have national nuclear weapons. All of that, the outcome is not good. Where we are today is trying to get Democrats, particularly Senate Democrats, to tell the president this is a bad deal. And unfortunately, what we find ourselves in is almost no Senate Democrat, no Democrat willing to face the president. And I don't say that in a partisan way. We need Republicans to tell a Republican president that it's wrong. We need Democrats to tell a Democrat president it's wrong. And we need to put the national security way above the nature of partisan politics in this country, and that's not happening. This legislation now pending, my hope is once the American people see what is in an agreement, right, that they will then insist that we, Congress, oppose that agreement.
Well, how is the American people going to see it when you can't even see it?
That's the point of this legislation is the president must, within 5 days of reaching an agreement, present the actual language of the agreement to Congress. That then allows us and the American people to see it. To me, that is a primary mission of this legislation, is to put pressure on Congress to then reject a bad deal.
Right, understood. Senator, let me get your thoughts on the latest out of Yemen, because speaking of upset, we've got reports this morning that Yemeni military officials say at least 20 Arab coalition troops have in fact landed in the southern coastal city of Aden on a reconnaissance mission. What do you know about this Arab coalition now in Yemen?
Well, what I would say is, first of all, the forces that we oppose and that the Saudis oppose in Yemen are supported by Iran. What I think we see is Iran willing to take this point in time in which the administration is so intent upon getting an agreement to expand their efforts to attack American interests around the globe. We saw the hijacking of a ship in the Strait of Hormuz in the last few days. Iran is very active all the time, but especially at the moment while this agreement is pending and the administration is unwilling to do anything in response because they want the agreement signed. So again, I think we need to start with the premise that Iran is a very dangerous country in the world, the largest promoter of terrorism, and yet we believe we can strike, and the administration believes they can strike a deal with them related to nuclear capabilities. It just highlights how dangerous the world is. We need a president who, when he or she draws the line in the sand and says, this is our position, that we respond when that line is broken. And so what we're missing in today's national security efforts on protecting our country is a president who speaks and is trusted by our allies and feared by our enemies. And Yemen is an example of where our allies don't trust us, right, and our enemies aren't fearful of us.
Senator, good to have you on the program today. Thanks very much. We'll be watching.
Maria, thanks.
Senator Jerry Moran. Meanwhile, China